The Dhammapada, Chapter 4, Puppha Vagga, Flowers, verses 44 and 45. The noble disciple will conquer this self. Ko imang pataving vijesati, yamalo kancha imang sadevakang, ko dhamma padang sudesitang, kusalo puphamiva pachissati, sekho pataving vijesati, yamalo kancha imang sadevakang, sekho dhamma padang sudesitang, kusalo pupphangiva pachissati. Who will comprehend this earth self, and this realm of Yama, and this world together with the Devas? Who will investigate the well-taught path of virtue, even as an expert garland maker will pick flowers? A disciple in training, Sekha, will comprehend this earth, and this realm of Yama together with the realm of the Devas. A disciple in training will investigate the well-taught path of virtue, even as an expert garland maker will pick flowers. Concentrate on your body. A group of bhikkhus, after accompanying the Buddha to a village, returned to the Jetavana monastery. In the evening, while the bhikkhus were talking about the trip, especially the condition of the land, whether it was level or hilly, or whether the soil was clayey or sandy, red or black, etc., the Buddha visited them. Knowing the subject of their talk, he said, "Bhikkhus, the earth you are talking about is external to the body. It is better, indeed, to examine your own body and strive to understand what this body is." The Buddha added, through understanding oneself, a bhikkhu would be able to understand this world, heaven and hell. He also would be able to realize the sublime Dhamma, which is like a garland arranged by an expert garland maker. Reflecting mindfully on the advice given, that group of bhikkhus purified their minds of all mental impurities and attained sainthood. Verse 46. Like a mirage is this body. Penupamang kayamimang viditva, marichi dhammang abhisambuddhano, chetvana marasa papuphakani, adassanang machu rajasa gache. Knowing that this body is like foam, and comprehending its mirage nature, one should destroy the flower shafts of sensual passions of Mara, and pass beyond the sight of the king of death. The bhikkhu who contemplated on the body as a mirage. On one occasion, when the Buddha was residing in Jetavana monastery at Savatthi, a certain bhikkhu, after obtaining a subject of meditation from the Buddha, went to the forest for the purpose of practicing meditation. Although he strove diligently, he made little progress and was not happy with himself. So he thought, "I will return to Jetavana monastery and request the enlightened one to give me another subject of meditation, better suited to my temperament." With this thought in mind, he set out to return to Savatthi. On the way, he saw a mirage. Reflecting mindfully within himself, he realized that a mirage was, after all, only an illusion of a sheet of water. So, also, was his body an illusion and insubstantial by reason of birth and decay. Fixing his mind on the mirage, he continued with his meditation practice. Later, he went for a bath near the bank of the river Achiravati. While resting under a tree close to the river and seeing the froth breaking up, he realized further the impermanent nature of the body. From the Jetavana monastery, the Buddha saw the Bhikkhu, sent forth his radiance, and exhorted him, "Bhikkhu, you are on the right track. Keep it up. It is good that you have realized that the body is impermanent like the froth, and insubstantial like a mirage." At the conclusion of the exhortation, the Bhikkhu attained Arahanthood. Verse 47. Death takes the sensual unawares. Puppani heva pachimantang vyasatta manasang narang suttang gamang mahoghova machu adaya gacchati. The man who gathers flowers of sensual pleasure, whose mind is entangled, death carries off as a great flood sweeps away a sleeping village. Vidudabha seeks vengeance on the Sakyans. King Pasenadi of Kosala, wishing to marry into the clan of the Sakyans, sent some emissaries to Kapilavatthu with a request for the hand of one of the Sakyan princesses. Not wishing to offend King Pasenadi, the Sakyan princes replied that they would comply with his request, but instead of a Sakyan princess, they sent a beautiful girl born of King Mahanama and a slave woman. King Pasenadi made that girl one of his chief consorts, and subsequently she gave birth to a son. This son was named Vidudabha. When the prince was 16 years old, he was sent on a visit to King Mahanama and the Sakyan princes. There he was received with some hospitality, but all of the Sakyan princes who were younger than Vidudabha had been sent away to a village, so that they would not have to pay respects to him. After staying a few days in Kapilavatthu, Vidudabha and his company left for home. Soon after they left, a maid-servant was given the task of washing with milk the place where Vidudabha had sat. As she did so, she remarked, "This is the place where that son of a slave woman had sat." At that moment, a member of Vidudabha's entourage, who had stayed on, overheard the remarks. She reported to Vidudabha that his mother, Vasabha Kattiya, had been the daughter of a slave girl. When Vidudabha was told about the incident, he became wild with rage and declared that one day he would wipe out the whole clan of the Sakyans. True to his word, when he became king, he marched on the Sakyan clan and massacred them all, with the exception of a few who were with Mahanama and some others. On their way home, Vidudabha and his army encamped on the sandbank of the river Achiravati. As heavy rain fell in the upper parts of the country on that very night, the river swelled and rushed down with great force, carrying away Vidudabha and his army into the ocean. On hearing about these two tragic incidents, the Buddha explained to the bhikkhus that his relatives, the Sakyan princes, had in one of their previous existences put poison into the river, killing the fishes. It was as a result of that particular action that the Sakyan princes had to die en masse. Then, referring to the incident about Vidudabha and his army, the Buddha said, "As a great flood sweeps away all the villagers in a sleeping village, so also Death carries away all the creatures hankering after sensual pleasures. Verse 48. With ungratified desires, the sensual die. Puppani heva pachinantang, vyasatta manasang narang, atittang yeva kamesu, antako kurute vasang. The man who gathers flowers of sensual pleasure, whose mind is entangled, and who is insatiate in desires, is overpowered by death. The lady who was born in Tavatimsa heaven, Pati Pujika Kumari. Pati Pujika Kumari was a lady from Savatthi. She married at the age of 16 and had 4 sons. She was a virtuous and generous lady who loved to make offerings of food and other requisites to the holy people. She would often go to the monastery and clean up the premises, fill the pots and jars with water, and perform other services. Pati Pujika also possessed the knowledge through which she remembered that in her previous existence she was one of the wives of Malabhari in the Deva world of Tavatimsa. She also remembered that she had passed away from there when all of them were out in the garden enjoying themselves, plucking flowers. So, every time she made offerings to the bhikkhus or performed other meritorious acts, she would aspire that she might be reborn in the Tavatimsa realm as a wife of Malabhari, her previous husband. One day, Pati Pujika fell ill and passed away. As she had so ardently wished, she was reborn in Tavatimsa Deva world, again as a wife of Malabhari. As 100 years in the human world is equivalent to just 1 day in Tavatimsa world, Malabhari and the other devas were still in the garden enjoying themselves, and Pati Pujika was barely missed by them. So, when she rejoined them, Malabhari asked her where she had been in the whole morning. She then told about her passing away from there and finally her return to Tavatimsa. The bhikkhus reported the death of Pati Pujika to the Buddha. He explained that the life of beings was very brief, and that before they could be satiated in their sensual desires, they would be overpowered by death. Verse 49. Saintly monks cause no inconvenience to any. Yathapi bhamaro puphang vanno gandham ahethayang paleti rasangadaya evangame muni chare. As a bee without harming the flower, its color or scent flies away, collecting only the honey, even so should the sage wander in the village without affecting the faith and generosity or wealth of the villagers. The miserly rich man, Kosiya. In the village of Sakkara near Rajgha lived a miserly rich man by the name of Kosiya. One day, the rich man and his wife made some pancakes, but to avoid having to share them with others, they cooked the pancakes secretly in the uppermost story of their house. Early in the morning on that day, the Buddha, through his vision, saw the rich man and his wife and knew that both of them would soon attain the first stage of sainthood. So he sent his chief disciple, Venerable Mahamoggallana, to the house of Kosiya, with instructions to bring the couple to the Jetavana monastery in time for the midday meal. Venerable Mahamoggallana, by supernormal power, reached Kosiya's house in an instant and stood at the window. The rich man saw him and asked him to leave, but Mahamoggallana just ignored his request. In the end, Kosya told his wife, "Make a very small pancake and give it to him." So she took just a small amount of dough and put it in the pan. But the dough filled up the whole pan. Kosya thought his wife must have put in too much, so he himself took just a pinch of dough and put it into the pan. And again, his pancakes swelled as before. It so happened that however little dough they put in, they were unable to make small pancakes. At last Kosya asked his wife to offer one from the basket to the Bhikkhu. When she tried to take out one from the basket, it would not come off because all the pancakes were stuck together and could not be separated. By this time, Kosya had lost all appetite for pancakes and offered the whole basket to the monk. Mahamoggallana then delivered a discourse on charity to both of them. He also told the couple that the Buddha was waiting with other bhikkhus at the Jetavana monastery in Savatthi. Mahamoggallana took the couple together with their basket of pancakes to the presence of the Buddha. There they offered the pancakes to the Buddha and to the other bhikkhus. At the end of the meal, the Buddha delivered a discourse on charity, and both Kosya and his wife realized the Dhamma. Verse 50. Seek not others' faults, but your own. Na pare sang vilomani, na pare sang kata katang, attanova avikheya, katani akatani cha. One should not pry into the faults of others, into things done and left undone by others. One should rather consider what by oneself is done and left undone. Pay no attention to curses. A rich lady from Savatthi was a supporter and disciple of a naked ascetic by the name of Patika. Because of her strong devotion to the naked ascetic, she treated Patika as she would her own son. She had many friends and neighbors. All her neighbors were lay disciples of the Buddha. They frequently visited the Jetavana monastery to pay their respects and to listen to the religious discourses given by the Enlightened One. When she heard her neighbors praising the virtues of the Buddha, she wanted to go to the monastery to pay her homage and also to listen to his religious discourses. However, Patika prevented her from going to the monastery on several occasions. So instead of going to the monastery, she invited the Buddha through her own son to her house for almsgiving. Choice food was prepared for the almsgiving. After the meal, the Buddha expressed his appreciation, anumodhana. Hearing the golden voice of the Buddha delivering the wonderful and glorious Dhamma for the first time in her life, her whole body was suffused with joy and happiness, and she exclaimed spontaneously, "Well said, well said." Patika, the naked ascetic who was in the next room, heard the applause uttered by the rich lady. "She is no longer my disciple," thought Patika. Fuming with rage, he came out of the room and cursed both the lady and the Buddha, and left the house angrily, still shouting his abuses. The lady was embarrassed and so ashamed that she could not concentrate on what the Buddha was saying. The Enlightened One advised her not to be concerned about those curses and threats, but to be mindful of her own good and bad deeds. At the end of the discourse, she attained the first stage of sainthood. Verses 51 and 52. Practice is better than mere teaching. Yatapi ruchirang puppang vanna vantang agandhakam evang subhasita vacha aphala hoti akubbato Yathapi ruchirang puphang vannavantang sagandhakang evang subhasita vacha saphala hoti sakubbato. As a flower that is lovely and beautiful, but is scentless, even so, fruitless is the well-spoken word of one who does not practice it. As a flower that is lovely, beautiful, and scent-laden, even so fruitful is the well-spoken word of one who practices it. To whom should one pay respect? Chattapani. A devotee named Chattapani, who had attained the second stage of sainthood, lived in Savatthi. On one occasion, Chattapani was at the Jetavana monastery, listening to a sermon given by the Buddha when King Pasenadi came to pay his respect to the Buddha. Chattapani did not stand up because he thought that by standing up it might mean that he was paying respect to the king, but not paying due respect to the Buddha. The king took that as an insult and was very much offended. The Buddha knew exactly how the king felt, so he told the king of the virtues of Chattapani, who was also well versed in the Dhamma. On hearing this, the king was impressed and was no longer offended with Chattapani. When the king next met Chattapani, he requested him to teach the Dhamma to his two consorts. He declined and suggested the king request the Buddha to assign a bhikkhu for this purpose. The Buddha assigned Venerable Ananda to go regularly to the palace to teach the Dhamma to Queen Mallika and Queen Vasabha Kattiya. After some time, the Buddha asked Ananda about the progress of the two queens. Ananda replied that although Mallika was learning the Dhamma seriously, Vasabha Kattiya was not paying sufficient attention. On hearing this, the Buddha said that the Dhamma could be of benefit only to those who learn it seriously with due respect and proper attention, and then practice diligently what was taught. Verse 53. Do much good. Yathapi Puppha rasimha kaira mala gune bahu evang jatena machena kattabbang kusalang bahum. As from a heap of flowers many a garland is made, even so many good deeds should be done by one subject to birth and death. The most devout lady, Visakha. Visakha was the daughter of a rich man of Bhaddiya named Dhananjaya, and his wife Sumana Devi, and the granddaughter of Mendaka, one of the 5 extremely wealthy men of King Bimbisara's kingdom. When Visakha was very young, the Buddha came to Bhaddiya. On that occasion, the rich man, Mendaka, took Visakha and her companions with him to pay homage to the Buddha. After hearing the discourse given by the Buddha, Visakha, her grandfather, and all her companions attained the first stage of sainthood. When Visakha came of age, she married Punnavadhana, son of Migara, a rich man in Savatthi. On the day of her marriage, her father, Dhananjaya, gave Visakha 10 admonitions to observe as a dutiful wife. The admonitions are: 1. Do not carry the indoor fire outside. 2. Do not carry the outdoor fire inside. 3. Give only to those that give. 4. Do not give to those that do not give. 5. Give both to those that give and do not give. 6. Sit happily. 7. Eat happily. 8. Sleep happily. 9. Tend the fire. 10. Honor the household divinities. The implied meaning is as follows. Fire here signifies slandering. The wife should not speak ill of her husband and parents-in-law to others. Neither should their shortcomings nor household quarrels be reported elsewhere. 2. A wife should not listen to the reports and stories of other households. 3. Things should be lent only to those who return them. 4. No article should not be lent to those who do not return them. 5. Poor relatives and friends should be helped even if they do not repay. 6. A wife should stand and not remain sitting on seeing her parents-in-law. This admonition deals with the modesty of a woman and the respect that should be shown to elders like parents-in-law. 7. Before taking her meal, a wife should first see to the needs of her parents-in-law and husband. She should see that the servants too are well cared for. 8. This does not mean that a wife should sleep as long as she likes. Before sleeping, a wife should see that all doors are locked, servants have performed their duties, and that parents-in-law and husband have gone to bed. 9. Parents-in-law and husband should be regarded as fire. Deal as carefully with them as one deals with fire. 10. Parents-in-law and husband are regarded as divinities. One day, while Migara was having his meal, a bhikkhu stopped for alms at his house, but Migara completely ignored the bhikkhu. Visakha, seeing this, told the bhikkhu, "I am sorry, Venerable Bhikkhu, my father-in-law only eats stale food." On hearing this, Migara was very angry and ordered her to leave the house. Visakha replied she would not leave the house. Instead, she summoned for the 8 elders who were sent by her father to accompany her and to advise her on any problems she might face in her new home. It was for them to decide whether she was guilty. When the elders came, Migara told them, "While I was having my food in a gold bowl, Visakha said that I was taking stale food. For this offense I'm sending her away." Thereupon Visakha explained as follows. "When I saw my father-in-law completely ignoring the bhikkhu standing for alms food, I thought to myself that since my father-in-law was not doing any meritorious deed in this existence, he was only eating the fruits of his past good deeds. So I said, 'My father-in-law only eats stale food. Now, sirs, what do you think? Am I guilty?' The elders decided that Visakha was not guilty. Visakha then announced that she who had absolute and unshakable faith in the teaching of the Buddha could not stay where bhikkhus were not welcomed. She also said if she was not given permission to invite the bhikkhus to the house to offer alms food and make other offerings, she would leave the house. Therefore, Migara granted her all her requests. The next day, the Buddha and his disciples were invited to the house of Visakha. When alms food was about to be offered, she invited her father-in-law to join her in offering the food, but he refused the invitation. When the meal was over, again she invited her father-in-law to join her in hearing the discourse to be given by the Buddha. Her father-in-law felt that he should not refuse for a second time. But his ascetic teachers, the Nigantas, would not let him go. However, they conceded that he could listen from behind a curtain. After hearing the Buddha's discourse, Migara's good kamma ripened and he attained the first stage of sainthood. He felt very thankful to the Buddha and also to his daughter-in-law. Being so thankful, he declared that henceforth Visakha would be like a mother to him, and Visakha came to be known as Migara Mata. Visakha gave birth to several sons and daughters. Visakha possessed an immensely valuable, gem-encrusted cloak given by her father as a wedding present. One day, Visakha went to the Jetavana monastery. On arrival at the monastery, she found that her bejeweled cloak was too heavy. So she took it off, wrapped it up in her shawl, and gave it to the maid to hold it and take care of it. The maid absent-mindedly left it at the monastery. It was the custom for Venerable Ananda to look after the things left by any of the lay disciples. Visakha sent the maid back to the monastery, saying, "Go and look for the bejeweled cloak. But if Ananda has already found it and kept it in a place, do not bring it back. I will donate the bejeweled cloak to the venerable monks." But Ananda did not accept her offer. So Visakha decided to sell the bejeweled cloak and donate the money. But as there was no one who could afford to buy the bejeweled cloak, Visakha bought it back herself. With this money she built a monastery which came to be known as Pubbha. After the merit offering ceremony, she called all her family members, and on that night she told them that all her wishes had been fulfilled, and that she had nothing more to realize. Then, reciting some verses, she went round and round the monastery. Some bhikkhus hearing her thought she was singing and reported to the Buddha that Visakha was not like before, and that she was going round the monastery singing. "Could it be that she has gone off her mind?" they asked the Buddha. The Buddha replied, "Today, Visakha had all her wishes of the past and present existences fulfilled, and on account of that sense of achievement, she is feeling elated and contented." Visakha was just reciting some verses to express her happiness. She certainly had not gone off her mind. Visakha, throughout her previous existences, had always been a generous donor and an ardent promoter of the doctrine. The Buddha then revealed that Visakha, in one of her past existences, was born during the time of a previous Buddha by the name of Padummutara Buddha. At that time, after admiring the qualities of her friend who was the chief female lay disciple and benefactress of Padummutara Buddha, she had cherished a desire to possess those sterling qualities. So, after offering alms food to Padummutara Buddha and his bhikkhus for 7 days, she had made an earnest wish that she would one day be reborn as the chief female lay disciple and benefactress of a future Buddha. With his supernormal powers, Padummutara Buddha looked into the future, and having determined that her earnest wish could be fulfilled, he confirmed that Visakha would be able to fulfill her wish. Also, in one of her later existences, she also received the same assurance from Kassapa Buddha regarding her earnest wish. The Buddha concluded the discourse by saying that Visakha was strongly inclined to do good deeds and had done much good in her previous existences, just as an expert florist makes many garlands from a collection of flowers. Verses 54 and 55. Moral fragrance wafts everywhere. Na puppha gandho pativatang eti, na chandanang tagara mallika va. Satancha gandho pativatang eti, Sabbadisa sappuriso pavati, Chandanang tagarang vapi, Uppalang atha vassiki, Ete sangandha jatanang, Silagandho anuttaro. The scent of flowers cannot go against the wind, nor the scent of sandalwood, nor of tagara, nor of jasmine. Only the reputation of the virtuous ones, the sappurisa, pervades in every direction. There are the scents of sandalwood, tagara, lotus and jasmine, but the fragrance of virtue surpasses all scents. The question raised by the Venerable Ananda. While Venerable Ananda was sitting by himself one evening, the problem relating to scents and perfumes came to his mind, and he pondered. The scent of wood, the scent of flowers, and the scent of roots all spread with the current of wind, but not against it. Is there no scent which would spread with the current of the wind as well as against it? Is there no scent or fragrance which would pervade every part of the world? The Buddha answered, Ananda, supposing there is one who takes refuge in the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, who observes the 5 moral precepts, who is generous and not avaricious, such a man is truly virtuous and truly worthy of praise. The reputation of that virtuous one would spread far and wide, and bhikkhus, Brahmins, and laymen all alike would speak in praise of him wherever he lives. Verse 56. The scent of virtue is by far the best. Appamatto ayangandho, yayang tagara chandani, yocha silavatangandho, vati devesu uttamo. The scents of tagara and of sandalwood are very faint, but the scent or reputation of the virtuous is the strongest. It spreads even to the abodes of the devas. Sakka gives alms to Venerable Kassapa. Arising from Nirodha Samapatti, whereby the Venerable temporarily suspended all mental activities, Mahakassapa entered into an area where poor people were dwelling in the city of Rajagaha for alms food. His intention was to give a poor man an opportunity of gaining great merit as a result of offering alms food to one who had just come out of Nirodha Samapatti. Sakka, king of the Devas, wishing to take the opportunity of offering alms food to Kassapa, assumed the form of a poor old weaver and came to Rajagaha with his wife Sujata. The Venerable Mahakassapa stood at their door. The poor old weaver took the bowl from Venerable Mahakassapa and filled up the bowl with rice and curry. The delicious smell of the curry spread everywhere. Then it occurred to Kassapa that this person was not an ordinary human being, and he came to realize that this was in fact Sakka himself. Sakka admitted the fact and claimed that he too was poor because he had had no opportunity of offering anything to anyone during the time of the Buddha. So saying, Sakka and his wife Sujata left Mahakassapa after paying their respects. From his monastery, the Buddha saw Sakka and Sujata leaving and told the bhikkhus about Sakka offering alms food to Venerable Mahakassapa. The bhikkhus wondered how Sakka knew that Venerable Mahakassapa had just come out of Nirodha Samapatti, and that it was the right and auspicious time for him to make an offering to Venerable Mahakassapa. The question was put to the Buddha, who answered, Bhikkhus, the reputation of a virtuous one like my son Kassapa spreads far and wide. It reaches even the Deva world. On account of his good reputation, Sakka himself has come to pay his respects. A note from the author. Nirodha Samapatti. Here, a saint or an Arahant who has eradicated mental impurities can, by willpower, temporarily arrest the ordinary flow of consciousness even for 7 days. When one attains to this state, all mental activities cease, although there exists heat and life, devoid of any breathing. At this state, a saint is immune from danger. Nirodha means cessation, and Samapatti is attainment. This is the period during which the Buddhas, Pacceka Buddhas, and Arahants experience Nibbanic bliss while living in this world. Verse 57. Rebirth consciousness of Arahants cannot be traced. Te sang sampanna silanang appamada viharinang sammadanya vimuttanang maro maggang navindati. Mara finds not the path of those who are virtuous, careful in living, and freed by right knowledge. Godhika attains sainthood while attempting suicide. On one occasion, Venerable Godhika was diligently practicing tranquility and insight meditation at the side of Isigili mountain in Magadha. When he had achieved one-pointedness of mind, jhana, he became very ill and it impaired effectiveness of his practice. In spite of his sickness, he kept striving diligently, but every time he made any progress, he was overcome by sickness. He was thus afflicted 6 times. Finally, he decided to strive for arahanthood even if he were to die in the process. So, without relaxing, he practiced diligently. In the end, he decided to take his own life. Choosing physical pain as the object of meditation, he cut his own throat with a knife. Concentrating on the pain, he achieved one-pointedness of mind and attained arahanthood before his passing away. Although it is extremely difficult to maintain concentration in the face of pain, he showed his determination. When Mara learned that Godhika had died, he tried to find out where he was reborn, but failed to find him. So, assuming the likeness of a young man, Mara approached the Buddha and inquired where Godhika was. The Buddha replied, "It will be of no benefit to you to learn of the destination of Godhika, for having been freed of mental defilements, he became an Arahant and ended rebirth. One like you, Mara, for all your power, will not be able to find out where Arahants go after death." A note from the author. The moral question of whether suicide is justifiable or not does not arise here, because Godhika had eradicated craving and any mundane ethical problems are left behind on attaining arahanthood. Verses 58 and 59. Greatness may be found even amongst the basest. The wise outshine the worldlings. Yatha sankara dhanasming ujhitasming mahapathe padumang tattha jayitha suchigandhang manoramang evang sankara bhutesu andhabhute putujjane atirochati panyaya samma sambuddha savako. As upon a heap of rubbish thrown on the highway, a sweet-smelling, lovely lotus may grow, even so, amongst worthless being, a disciple of the fully enlightened one outshines the blind and ignorant worldlings in wisdom. Giving alms to test the wise. Sirigutta and Garahadinna. There were two friends named Sirigutta and Garahadinna in Savatthi. Sirigutta was a follower of the Buddha, and Garahadinna was a follower of the Nigantas, the ascetics who were hostile to the Buddha. At the instigation of the Nigantas, Garahadinna often said to Sirigutta, "What benefit do you get by following the Buddha? Come, be a follower of my teachers." Having been told this many times, Sirigutta said to Garahadinna, "Tell me, what do your teachers know?" To this, Garahadinna replied that his teachers knew everything. With their great power, they knew the past, the present, and the future, and also the thoughts of others. So, Sirigutta invited the Nigantas to his house for alms food. Sirigutta wanted to find out the truth about the Nigantas, whether they really possessed the power of knowing other people's thoughts, etc. So he made a long, deep trench and filled it up with dirt and filth. Seats were then placed precariously over the trench, and empty pots were brought in and covered up with cloth and banana leaves to make them appear as if they were full of rice and curries. When the Nigantas arrived, they were requested to enter one by one, to stand near their respective seats, and to sit down simultaneously. As all of them sat down, the flimsy ropes broke and the Nigantas fell into the filthy trench. Then Sirigutta taunted them, "If you know the past, the present, and the future, why don't you know the thoughts of others?" All the Nigantas then fled in terror and embarrassment. Garahadinna naturally was furious with Sirigutta after this incident, and refused to talk to his friend for some time. Then he decided that he would have his revenge on Sirigutta. He pretended that he was no longer angry, and one day asked Sirigutta to invite the Buddha and his disciples for almsgiving on his behalf. So Sirigutta invited the Buddha to the house of Garahadinna. At the same time, he told the Buddha about what he had done to the Nigantas, the teachers of Garahadinna. He also expressed his fear that this invitation might be a revenge and that the invitation should be accepted only after due consideration. The Buddha, with his supernormal power, knew that this would be the occasion for the two friends to attain the first stage of sainthood, and therefore accepted the invitation. Garahadinna made a trench, filled it with live coals, and covered it with mats. The next day, the Buddha and the bhikkhus went to the house of Garahadinna. When the Buddha stepped on the mat over the trench, the mat and live coals miraculously disappeared. Instead, lotus flowers, each as large as a cartwheel, sprang up for the Buddha and his disciples to sit upon. Seeing this miracle, Garahadinna was very much alarmed, and he said to Sirigutta, "Help me, dear friend. Out of my desire for revenge, I have truly done a great wrong. My bad designs have had no effect at all on your teacher. I have not prepared any food. The pots in my kitchen are all empty. Please help me." Sirigutta then told Garahadinna to go and look in the pots. When Garahadinna found all the pots filled with food, he was astounded, and all at the same time he was very much relieved and very happy. So the food was offered to the Buddha and his disciples. After the meal, the Buddha expressed his appreciation, anumodana, of the meritorious act and then said, "Ignorant worldlings, lacking in knowledge, do not know the unique qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and so they are like the blind. But the wise, having knowledge, are like people with sight." The Buddha expounded the Dhamma in a gradual manner. While listening attentively to the religious discourse, Garahadinna's body was slowly suffused with joy and happiness. At the end of the discourse, both Garahadinna and Sirigutta attained the first stage of sainthood. Both of them renewed their friendship and became strong supporters of the Buddha and his bhikkhus. They also donated most of their wealth to the cause of the Buddha Dhamma. Back at the Jetavana monastery, the bhikkhus expressed surprise that lotus flowers sprang up from a trench filled with coals. The Buddha replied that it was not the first time, and in response to their request, he related in detail the Kadirangara Jataka,